Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampadhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirsha Namam. Namaste everyone. Welcome to our study of the Bhagavad Gita, resuming after the Christmas and New Year's break. We had been studying for quite some time, chapter 13. It's called Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga, the discrimination between the field and the knower of the field. The field is everything in manifestation. The knower of the field is the consciousness, that aspect of Atmano Brahman inside us. And the two have got mixed up. And that's the cause of this non-discrimination or the capacity not to be able to separate the two is the cause of our being born again and again. And at the same time, with that understanding, liberation or mukti means developing that capacity by which we can separate vibhaga, the two, kshetra and kshetrajna. So we've gone through the all the sutras or the verses of the Gita, looking at the word-to-word meaning, and then we had gone and tried to understand each verse in a bit more detail. And now we are going through the third round where we are trying to assimilate and say, what is the gist of this chapter 13? And so probably in another 1 or 2 classes, we should be able to summarize and wrap this and then take up a next chapter of the Gita. So we were in chapter 13, around somewhere here, verse 26, which says, Yavat sanjayate kinchit sattvam sthavar jangamam kshetra kshetrajna vibha sanyogat tadvidhi bharatarshabha. O sign, O Arjuna, whatever object, moving or not moving, sthavara means not moving, jangama means moving, that comes into being, yavat sanjayate. Now that is from the association of the field and the knower of the field. So that is the cause of any manifestation. If the field is there and there's no knower, there's no manifestation. The knower has to come to in contact with the known, and then there is a knowledge happening in there. So we have gone in detail in this drawing. You can see at the bottom is Prakriti, the Kshetra, Purusha, right on top is Kshetrajna. The two are different manifestations of energy, let us say, and when they interact in between, in the mind space, there is an experience. Prakriti is known, Purusha is the knower, in the middle is knowledge. And that is that. So the bondage that happens is not something out there, it is how we are attached to something and whether we have the capacity to detach ourselves from those things, from anything of this world, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, all are in one form or the other a source of bondage. So here are 2 or 3 important verses that Swami Vivekananda used to love, and he refers to them in the complete works. Basically, what we are trying to do, or what Sri Krishna is trying to get us to develop, is the capacity of spiritual seeing. Ya pashyati sa pashyati. Pashyati means to see. Ya means that person. That person sees who sees in this particular way. So here it does not mean seeing through the physical eyes. With the physical eyes only, we will see the shape, the colors and form, that's all. Spiritual seeing is, beyond that is something called the intellectual seeing. So when somebody is talking and he says, you see, and you also say, I see, means I understand. I can conceptualize it in a clear way. Spiritual seeing is not intellectually understanding. And therefore, no matter how much we try to pour through the scriptures, we might get a very much clearer idea of what the scriptures are trying to, or the sages or the writers are trying to get across to us through the scriptures, but we'll never have a spiritual realization out of that. Anubhuti will not come through intellectual gymnastics or study. For that, it requires the opening of the spiritual eye, Divya Chakshu, which is what Sri Krishna gave to Arjuna, and suddenly the world became transformed for him. He could see directly in a spiritual way that Sri Krishna standing there was the supreme being. Everything was contained in him. He could see the future also, the war that had been completed, even though at the gross physical level it had not started. Therefore, when the spiritual dimension opens in us, we transcend the limitations of the senses, we transcend the limitations of the mind. Actual spiritual life, japa, meditation, puja, everything, festivals going on, pilgrimage and everything, should be is meant for this opening of the spiritual eye or opening of the spiritual consciousness. And so Sri Krishna is trying to set in our minds very clearly what is that spiritual seeing. And he says, he who sees the Supreme Lord as existing equally in all beings and as the imperishable in the perishable things, such a person really sees the thing. So from that point of view, perspective, we are all spiritually blind if we are only seeing the world through our five senses. What would a Brahmagyani, a knower of Brahman, how would he perceive the world? He would see, for example, in our analogy, we have said that in the analogy that the ocean is like the supreme consciousness, the supreme being, absolute Brahman, on which there are so many waves. These waves are the different jivatmas. Now, if you're looking, standing on the shore, you see so many waves. You see the same forms, changing, coming, going, and this is the Jagat, always in Srishti, Sthiti, Vinasha. But we are only seeing the form outside. Now, suppose you get into the water and just are snorkeling at that surface level. So now and then, when the wave hits over your head, you see water. The next moment, your head is out, you see the world out there. But you discover one thing, that all the waves are made out of the same water. So you find some higher common factor behind all the differences. And if you went deeper, you did a scuba diving, then you go beyond all the names and forms. The names and forms are there, but they're on the surface. Down below, it's water, water in every direction. So when he comes back, he sees the waves again, but he is aware that these are only names and forms that have been superimposed on the reality, which is the ocean. The ocean is the reality. It doesn't come and go. It's there permanent. But on that, these names and forms, whether it's a electron or mosquito or a plant or animal, a human being or divine being, or Lord Brahma himself, they're all names and forms in the supreme ocean of consciousness. So he who sees the supreme Lord, that means who sees the one consciousness as existing equally in all beings, he who sees the water in all the waves. And what's the differentiation? The imperishable among perishable things. Perishable means that it's subject to, it perishes, it doesn't last, it decays, it gets destroyed. Imperishable, it doesn't get destroyed. So in these two things, the ocean and the waves, the ocean is the imperishable and these names and forms are perishable. So the idea is to see the imperishable in the perishable things itself. So if we want to realize Brahman or God, where do we go? Do you have to go to in some mountain cave or some far away place? You might go there just to get away from all the distractions and things. But there also you will see names and forms anywhere and everywhere, whether on earth or on any other planet, whether here or in heaven also, names and forms will be there. So here is a very interesting hint as to where to seek for the highest reality in all these forms. It's not out there, but if you see through the eyes, you'll get caught in the name and form. That means These devices, the five senses that are there through which we apprehend the universe, they are not good enough. They just give us a appearance of things, not the reality of things. So the correct language when we are trying to describe the world, suppose we see a tree, then the precision would be something appears to me as the tree. In reality, it is something else. Its highest reality, it is pure consciousness. And so, if you remember that particular experience of Sri Ramakrishna when he was praying to the Divine Mother for her vision, and she blessed him, and he describes that in detail, and he said, suddenly this form of the mother, the image, stone image of Kali in the Dakshineshwara temple, the walls of the temple, the marble floor, everything suddenly disappeared. Means for another person who is in that same room, he is still seeing it, but for him, that means some internal change had happened. And that means now he's not seeing the names and forms, but he is able to experience the reality behind the names and forms. And he says, in every direction, I saw that an ocean of consciousness in every direction, waves and waves. And I too am inside one of being in that ocean of consciousness. We remember that experience of Manmathanath Ganguly, where Swami Vivekananda, as his guru, lifted his consciousness, and suddenly uh, the all these things that he was seeing outside, the river, the trees, the temple, they all disappeared. He experienced a vibration inside his own head, and then suddenly he saw that there was an ocean of consciousness in all directions everywhere. He didn't have to go to some other place, Vaikuntha or some loka. He was sitting there physically. What had happened was the mind got elevated to another level. As a result, that which was appearing as this world now was experienced as an ocean of consciousness in which he was also part of that consciousness. Interestingly, in that experience, he says he did not feel that vast difference between Swami Vivekananda and himself. He said, in the ocean, Swami Vivekananda just like another wave, and I'm another wave, no big deal about that. But when he came down back to his old self, then he realized we are not the same being. There's a difference in the manifestation of the power between the two of us. So, so we have to digest this, visualize this very clearly as to what spiritual struggle or sadhana is about, what type of result we are trying to achieve. And when we sit down for japa and meditation or studying and doing any spiritual practice, we should always be mindful and have that clarity as to the nature of a true spiritual experience. Just getting a little bit of thrill and a little bit of nice calm feeling because you sat down long for meditation and all that, that is not really the goal. And we should not be simply satisfied with that. Oh, today I had a nice Japan meditation and I'm making some progress. Yes, you'll have to persist in that, but we should not think this is the goal and I have reached it or I have made good progress. No, we should always be mindful to keep our eyes on the Everest. And so what happens then? Then the desire or the effort might redouble. You said, I have to put more time, more effort, and and uh, and until I have that particular spiritual experience. So samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. Parameshwaram, you have to, if you can't see him inside your own heart, if you can't see him behind the names and forms that appears in front of us human beings, then we need to build one temple. We have to build one, put some image in there, photos, a picture, consecrate that and worship that and take that support to grow. So it's like the kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, we need those supports. Some people need that, others say, we don't need that. I know that God or the divine dwells in my own heart. I'm going to focus in there, sharpen my mind, purify my mind. And when that happens, I will have that experience. I don't have to go anywhere. I am the divine being. Just in ignorance, I'm experiencing myself as a personality, as a jivatma, as an ignorance, as an ego, and that has got more and more covered by all these thoughts and samskaras and all those things. This actual work is cleansing of the mind, chitta shuddhi. And that is the real puja, manas puja. When we can do some ritualistic puja because it engages the mind, but we at some point we can outgrow that external materials and ceremonies and all those things. Internal puja and the manas puja. This is a beautiful mantra. Those who would like to know, I can teach about how to, when you meditate, how do you visualize the divine presence and actually do that actual worship, but internally, mentally. It's called manas puja. Okay, so that is 27. 28 is very similar. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram nahi naste atmana atmanam tato yati param gati. So again, samam pashyan iha sarvatra. So what is the result when you have that type of realization or even intellectual understanding? Maybe you have not had that actual experience, but you have thought about it so deeply that this idea has become so deeply ingrained in your mind that it, while you see things physically, the intellectual idea also comes to say, behind the forms, there is some reality there. And we keep our attention on that underlying spiritual reality. Who is in me, who is in everyone else. This is very, very powerful. And this is the basis of all ethics and reality. Why should we be kind to somebody? Why should we not hurt anyone? Why should we be humble? And all those things. So Holy Mother says, in the fullness of realization, her teaching is very, very simple, all the Sanskrit, but the message is still the same. She says, in the fullness of realization, one sees that the one who dwells in our own heart dwells in the heart of all beings. It's an actual experience at that time. And then one becomes truly humble. There's no artificiality in there that I'm, just showing respect to somebody else who are higher than me, greater than me. Then in front of them, we are humble. But those who are lesser than us, then people are not humble in front of them. But here, you are humble in front of everyone. Why? Because the one who dwells in our heart dwells in the heart of everyone. When you meditate and pray on him in our own heart, that same being is there in front of everyone else. So here, the question of ahimsa, non-violence. Na hinastya atmana atmanam. One does not do injury to oneself who is now realized to be present in all other beings. So hurting others is really hurting ourselves. Cheating others cheats ourselves. Telling lies to others, so denies that oneness there, because you can only hate somebody, do harm to somebody, cheat somebody, do any of those things when you think that person is other than you. But you would not do that to yourself. And suddenly, when you understand deeply that really I am in every being and all beings are in me, then my conduct, my behavior, my interaction with everyone becomes transformed. And that itself becomes a wonderful sadhana. So you see, practical Vedanta doesn't mean that we'll just worship God in a temple or we'll meditate on Him in our own hearts. We'll close our eyes and close our temples and do that. But when we open our eyes, we'll go out and interact with people. And with a spiritual understanding, we'll remind ourselves that the one I was meditating in my own heart, whom I'm trying to realize, whose grace I'm seeking, is present in front of me in all these forms. As your husband, as your wife, as your children, as your in-laws, your relatives, your neighbor, your clients, your patients, your students, everywhere. To be able to maintain that outlook as much as possible, that itself becomes a type of sadhana. You set your mind to it and say, today I'm going out there. Apparently, I'll be interacting with people, doing all types of work, but with my spiritual understanding of Vedanta, as taught by Sri Krishna here and very strongly emphasized by Swami Vivekananda, Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva. So this is the basis. He has captured the essence of it. He says, that which is Jiva in front of you as a human being really is Shiva. Keep that idea, that knowledge, Shiva Jnane. Now go and deal with the same people again, but it doesn't become ordinary work, it becomes Seva. So we have to deeply meditate on this idea, assimilate it, reinforce it, and go out and test it. And you'll find it's not so easy. For a while, you might remember that, and then suddenly you'll forget, and maybe in the evening the idea comes, or So long that person is nice to you, you are continuously telling yourself, the Lord is there in front of me. And the moment he turns, otherwise you forget everything. So we lose our balance because that's not actually a realization, it's an intellectual idea that you're trying to hold into your mind. But in the whole day, even if you remember this thought that comes even 5 times, every time you'll feel a thrill of goodness. Oh, at least all my studying the Gita, at least now in my life, see how it is changing my perspective. And the moment you are able to put that one behind the many, then you'll find that we do not react to the world. We don't get attached to the world. We don't get attached to the names and forms now, because that's the problem. The problem is that we become attached to the names and forms in a very superficial way. We get attached to the appearance. Now we have told ourselves that the appearance is false. It appears and disappears. So, but the reality is that supreme being, and I am keeping my mind and eye on that. And so long we can do that, you'll find that you can go out and deal with all the world, do all activities, and the world will not be able to touch you. So, and we don't get attached to it. Work becomes transformed into worship, and this is a wonderful way to apply the Bhagavad Gita. Remember, the Gita was not taught to some sadhu in a mountain cave, it was taught to a warrior in a battlefield. We all have our own battles, and see how this knowledge can be utilized to transform our understanding and outlook of world. And so in that sense, the Gita is a very wonderful manual for life. It should be studied by young people so that they have this knowledge and they can apply it throughout their life. Not like some people will say, in old age we will read Bhagavad Gita. So, samam pashyan iha sarvatra, samavasthitam Ishwaram. Sama avasthitam Ishwaram. He is equally present everywhere in all things. The result is that na hinastya atmana atmanam. Na hinasti does not do injury. Atmana atmanam, of oneself by oneself. Therefore, what's the result? Tato yati param gatim. Therefore, if one practices this seriously all the time, as much as possible, and anything can be mastered over time through practice, it's called abhyas yoga. So you start the day, prime yourself up. This is what I'm going to be my perspective. Try to maintain that balance. Now and then we'll forget and slip and regather. And as you practice and practice and practice, that capacity to hold that idea forefront, the spiritual idea to the forefront, will transform our interaction with the world. We'll maintain a balance. The world will not be able to sweep us off our feet. We see that behind the names and forms, behind the good and bad, is the supreme being. He's playing all this hide and seek, and the world is really not such a terrible place, but it's actually a divine play where God has hidden himself in all these forms and is trying to frighten us, so to say, with the terrible experiences. Now I can see through the mask, okay, and see the reality, and therefore that is the method to open the spiritual eye. By the way, the word personality comes from Latin, I think, and it means a mask. A mask in the olden days, people who were enacting certain roles in a drama on the stage would put on a mask to depict a particular character. Likewise, the word personality really means a mask. Mask over this spiritual self, the Atman or Brahman, and we see the mask only. We don't see the reality when we see through the senses, when we see through the mind. Remember, spiritual experience is not possible through the physical eyes or not through the mental eyes. It is possible with the opening of what is called the faculty buddhi, which is the power of spiritual discrimination. Shuddha man, Shuddha buddhi, Shuddha Atma Ek. And therefore, japa, meditation with the help of the mantra, the energy of the mantra, with great concentration and devotion and with great perseverance, the task is to purify our mind. And as the purification happens more and more and more, we begin to feel, get a glimpse of that underlying reality which is present here and now, every in front of us, within us, and outside us. So this is a very powerful message of the Gita. So Prakriti eva karmani kriyamani sarvasha ya pashyati yatha atmanam akartaram sa pashyati. This word pashyati comes again and again, trying to say that we have to see in the right spiritual way, not through the physical senses. Therefore, we close our eyes and we focus our mind inside and try to open the spiritual eye. So he who sees actions as being done in various ways by nature, by Prakriti, by the Kshetra, and also the self as the known agent. What's the Atman doing? Is he really acting, or is he by his mere presence everything happens? So the Atman or Brahman is really inactive. There are no waves in deep inside the ocean. But by its power and energy, all changes are happening. The analogy that is given is, look, iron filings are, they don't have any capacity to move and power to move on their own. But when you bring in a magnet, they begin to move around. Does the magnet touch them directly? Answer is no. It's just the magnetic field. By being in the proximity of it, that change happens. So that consciousness is there inside us. Is it doing everything? No. By its mere presence, the ego, the intellect, the mind, the senses, the buddhi, all of them work. When that withdraws, samate. Okay, the drama is over. So, what is that consciousness or divine power inside us that is making all these wonderful things happen? By which understanding, thinking, contemplation, and all those higher things are there. That is where the inquiry should be like that. I want to go to the core of my being and not be caught by these changes that are happening here. Wherever there is change, something will come into creation, srishti. It will hold its form for a while, try to hold, that is sthiti. And then at some point it would not be able to hold old age, disease, or something, and it will go back to its forms, to its original course. So when we see all this action happening around the world in different forms, know that that happens due to prakriti, nature. But the atman is inactive. So the sense of doership that I am doing, that is, that belongs to uh, the prakriti part of it, nature part of it. Changes are happening there. We appropriate them to ourselves and we say, I'm doing it, I'm not doing it. So this confusion where this atman begins to think it is the doer of all actions, and therefore the results will come to it, good, bad, so type of thing. Success means happiness, failure means misery. That type of is born out of ignorance. So ignorance is the cause of all misery. If ever you feel miserable for anything, don't blame anything outside there. Ultimate cause is our own spiritual ignorance. And the way to do that is to bring in the light of spiritual knowledge, sort that understanding out, at least intellectually. We will take the responsibility on our own shoulder rather than blaming somebody else for making us miserable or something like that, and say, I can, because it is my own problem, I can sort this out. And the way to do is subjectively elevate our consciousness from, or separate ourselves from this identification with the body mind complex. This is the word. Chit and jada. Chit is the consciousness from top, jada is all prakriti. When they come together, they form a knot. It's called granthi. Chit, jada, granthi is what is the I sense. So sometimes people say, what is this ego? I can't locate it. I can't pinpoint it. It's there. I am feeling it. Is it my physical body? Is it my heart, in my head? Where is it? It's not a physical thing. It is something that happens when the pure consciousness interacts with prakriti. Like the sun in the sky falls on a pot of water. The body is the pot. The water is mind and intellect. In there, you will see a reflected sun. That reflected sun is the ego. Does it have its own independent existence? The answer is no. It exists because the sun is there. If the clouds come, there's no reflected sun. Or if there's no pot of water, the sun can still be there. There's still no reflected sun. So the two must come together. And when they come together, they form that I sense. And that I sense now begins to identify itself with the water and the pot, means with the mind and the body. So the changes are happening in the mind, and it says, oh, I'm knowing, I do not know, I'm happy, I'm miserable. Really, that is simply a change, a vritti, a modification that's happening in the mind, but the ego becomes identified with it and says, I am happening that. Or it says, becomes identified with the body. So I'm male, I'm female, I'm young, I'm old, and all that. Basically, that is another type of I amness. That's also a result of ignorance. In spiritual life, we say, give up this identification with the physical body, give up this identification with the mental body, identify yourself with your true reality, which is the sun in the sky. That is where my real identity is. Now, in this age, this what I identify myself is a big thing. Some people are in a biologically physical male body, you identify themselves as female, and this and that, and all confusion is there. Well, if you need to identify yourself with the supreme being, the Paramatman that is inside us. That type of Aham Brahmasmi, or Chidananda Rupo Shivoham, as in Nirvana Shatakam, Acharya Shankara teaches. That type of identification is good. It lifts us up out of this ignorance. Anything else binds us down there. So identification is good. Which way is the factor, important thing. Then यदा भूत पृथक भावम एकस्थम अनुपश्यति ततएव च विस्तारम ब्रह्म संपद्यते तदा. So the whole idea is to realize Brahman. And when would that happen? How do you know that I have realized that state of Brahma, or have attained this state of Brahma Jnana? Yada means when. Anupashyati, one realizes. It's not pashyati with eyes, it is anupashyati deeply. It's a sort of a realization, it's a direct experience. It's technically it's called aproksha anubhuti. Aksha means eyes. Paraksha means somebody else's eyes. So somebody went and saw something and reports it using his language description, and you listen to that and have some idea. Could be another country or something. That knowledge is not your own experience. It is somebody else's experience, whether you have read in a book or seen some photos, whatever. But when you yourself go and have that direct experience, then it is so far different from whatever you imagined by listening to that particular person's description or whatever you imagined by seeing those photos. It's a totally different experience. It's a direct experience. And that is very, very powerful. If it was simply some books or some description, then somebody can come and challenge, oh, maybe that fellow just took you for a ride, it's all fake news, or it's some photos you saw, all this is are digitally prepared, there's no particular country like that, it's all just your imagination. And so one can be confused, one can be ignorant there. But when you yourself go and see it, and then after that, if somebody comes and says, hey, it's not there, you say, hey, it can't be. I know from my own experience. That is the power of spiritual experience. And the scriptures are really recordings of those who actually had the experience themselves, and they try their best to capture them in words, in descriptions, in parables, in stories, and something give some hint at least we get. That's all we get. So never think that we can totally understand or have the same experience by reading the scriptures only or understanding. It gives you the inspiration, that's all. Sri Ramakrishna says the utility of scriptures, whether it's the Gita or Upanishad, anything, is that it gives us some idea about the truth, the reality, intellectually, and it gives you some idea about how to reach that goal. After getting that, one must engage in sadhana. So he says, in the village, some person is working in the city, and his wife sends a letter to him, asking him to send various things. He lost that letter. He's desperately looking for it here and there. After some time, he finds it. He asks somebody to read what is in there. Oh, he said, nothing. Your wife has said, send some food and medicine and clothes and this and that. What does the man do? After knowing the content of the letter, he doesn't start, talk staturing, what's the language, how beautiful it is, what are the meanings of those things. He doesn't do all that. He says, I've got know what's the meaning. He puts the letter aside. He goes out to do whatever has been asked to do. In that same way, scriptures have to be understood that it should translate into sadhana. You might go back to them and read a little bit for clarity, understanding, making sure that you're still going in the right direction. It's like a map and a compass. You're referring to that now and then just to make sure that you're not lost your way. But they could be fellow travelers in that same way. So he said, hey, we'll all travel together. And that's why it's called satsang. But start moving, doing sadhana. That is the important thing. So when one realizes that the diversity of living beings, all that is there in this universe, bhuta prathak bhavam, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, a worm, or insect, or a goat, a human being, or some god, everything in this universe is rooted in that one. What is that? All waves are rooted in that ocean. So when one realizes the unity behind the diversity, yada bhuta prathak bhavam ekastham anupashyati, tateva vistaram. Vistaram means is spread out everywhere. That one is present in all things. Then Brahma sampadyate tada. Then one becomes identified with Brahman. It means that you have to give up this identification with the wave. Because so long we are identified with that limited individuality, the personality, the wave, we'll never know what the ocean is. So at some point, the wave has to make a resolution that I will merge myself into that ocean. That's the only way I can be one with the ocean. That means in the devotional path, the devotee surrenders to the divine. The wave surrenders to the ocean, tries to integrate himself into it. In the path of knowledge, the Jnani says, oh, this wave is nothing, it's only an appearance. It doesn't have any substantial reality of its own. Why should I attach my reality is that I'm the ocean. Aham Brahmasmi. So he sort of, with the sheer power of intellect, disassociates himself from the wave and tries to identify himself with the ocean. So that requires a tremendous willpower. Not many people have that, have not developed it. So path of jnana is really a steep path. Not many people have that willpower and intellectual stamina to climb that. And so in Kali Yuga, Sri Ramakrishna says the path of devotion is better. But it's not just pure emotional, sentimental type of devotion. It is backed up with knowledge. Knowledge that about the reality I'm trying to approach. If I'm going to give up everything that I associate in this world and call that mine, then I should get something much higher. So the deep understanding is there that it's giving up of the microcosm for the macrocosm. It is giving up of something that's temporary, trivial, for in return for something this vast, infinite, wonderful. It's giving up that wave nature in and the result that we want is to realize the ocean nature. So that is how renunciation is to be understood. It doesn't mean that somebody just ran away from the world. It means trying to give up all these connections, associations, attachment to this ever-changing world, because they will all be taken away from us, whether we like it or not. So then there are a few verses, but basically we have got the essence of it. Here, being without beginning, so now we are beginning to talk about the Atman nature. Without beginning, that means it's beyond time. There's no past, no present, no future. Everything is in the eternal now. So when somebody goes into samadhi, they experience something. And when they come back, or in the process while they're going or coming down, they will see certain planes of existence where things are happening. But when they come back to the physical world, they say, hey, it hasn't started happening yet. Just like Arjuna went into that higher state, Sri Krishna's grace, he saw the battle is over, so many war has started and so many warriors had died and this and that. But when he returns to the physical plane, nothing has started yet. That means it's a very interesting concept of time there. The time that we experience in our physical world and the time that can be experienced at the mental level or the higher plane uh, are time, but they're not running at the same pace. At the lower level, it's like a very slow motion. In the higher level, it's running faster. And so if you can raise your mind to the next level, you'll experience certain things, like the movie reel is going at 2x, 3x. But when you come back, then certain scenes that you have experienced there have not yet unfolded at this lower level. It's a very interesting concept of time and space that changes as we change the mind level. So without beginning and beyond the three gunas, what are the three gunas? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. That's what makes up the Prakriti. With from the highest Brahmaloka to the Patala, everything is made out of these three gunas. Brahman is beyond the three gunas, it's beyond time. So being without beginning and without gunas, O Arjuna, this immutable supreme self, the ocean, the Paramatman, does not act, nor is affected, though indwelling in the body. So this is the thing. So inside us, as a Jivatman, that power is there. In its presence, the ego, the mind, the buddhi, the five senses, the body are doing their various duties. But the self is not doing anything. And it's not affected by all the changes that are happening. So in the beginning, Sri Krishna says, if the body is killed, burnt, fire will burn it, sword can kill it, water can dry it, air can dry it, water can wet it. All those things will happen to the physical body. But those changes do not in the least affect the Atman. It is there dwelling, immutable, unchangeable. And so Sri Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, you can fight this battle of life. Don't run away from it, but be established in that wisdom, that knowledge of your spiritual nature and the spiritual nature of all. Sthita prajna means have your wisdom established in that Atman nature. So you'll see in chapter 2 of chapter 1, Sri Krishna immediately tries to enlarge the perspective of the person Arjuna, who he is. You're not only a physical body, you're not only an individual, you're not a great warrior. Actually, we are all spiritual beings. And he tries to tell the nature of that spiritual entity, that it's immutable, it's never born, it doesn't die, and all that. And therefore, having totally integrated that full package knowledge, now lift your consciousness from this physical level to the highest level where you realize that oneness. After that, you can come back and fight and know that Atman is not affected by all these things. That's why it is the drama. It's a movie. In the movie cinema hall, light plays on the screen. So many characters comes, heroes and villains. Nice things happen. Shooting, killing happens. There's blood on the screen while the movie is going on. There's happiness and misery. We forget about the screen. We forget that this is only a play of light on the screen. We become identified with the heroes and the villains and begin to enjoy it. When this projector is switched off, the same pure clean screen is there. Likewise, when the projector of this nature is switched off, the Atman, unaffected by all that change, is still there. And that is the way. And self-realization means realizing that unaffected, unchangeable, pure Atman. That is our true nature. How to do that? Well, that Atman himself, it itself has to be gracious to us. Those who seek it, to them, the Atman reveals itself. In the Kathopanishad, or one of the Upanishad, it is said, what is it? What is the sutra? The Atman reveals itself to one who seeks it. And our job is to have that focus. Ask and it shall be given to you. Knock and it shall be opened to you. Seek and you shall find it. And this is what spiritual sadhana is all about. So one more verse, it says, as the all, so some examples are given about this, the unchangeable nature of the Atman. As the all pervading space is not tainted because it is so subtle, similarly, the self, the Atman, present everywhere in all bodies is not tainted. So in a room, if you light up a fire, there's smoke, and you feel that, oh, smoke, this room has become very polluted, the space has become polluted because it's full of all these particles. Well, you open the window, let the breeze come, and you find that all the smoke goes out in the room. The space in the room was still as pristine, pure, unaffected by all that change. Apparently that happened, but really did not touch. Likewise, this Atman is present in all beings, doing all this drama of this world, good, bad, fighting wars and this and all those type of things. But that is only happening at the Prakriti level. Atman is not affected, it's not born, it does not die. And when we become identified by that, with that Atman, then we also know that we are never born, we do not die, and this is only a drama, a play of the divine. Then we really enjoy. Until then, oh, this is not fun. So, as the all pervading space is not tainted, why? Because it's so subtle. Similarly, the Atman, which is the subtlest dimension of our being, is not present, though it's present in all things, is not affected, not tainted, not corrupted, not polluted. That means karma, good and bad, that is done by the body, by the mind, does not touch the self. It's very powerful because people do something wrong and they feel very bad about themselves and feel very negative about themselves. I've committed a great sin and I'm very impure and I'm so lowly and this and that. Now remind yourself that is that identification, all that is happening in the mind space. But the Atman never was involved. Let me associate myself and identify self with my Atman nature. Everything drops off like that. That is the power of spiritual knowledge and realization. So another one is there, Arjuna. Just as a single sun illumines the entire world, similarly, the Nava, the Kshetra, illuminates the Kshetra. The Nava is the Kshetrajna, illuminates the field, the Kshetra, the whole field. So, yeah, this is another example. Many things are happening because in the presence of the sun, light. But whatever happens in the world, they do not in any way affect the sun itself. Such is the untouchable nature, unaffected nature, uncorruptible nature of the pure self that is inside us. It's a very powerful message of the Bhagavad Gita, which can be realized by making this transition of this I sense, the identification, I amness, away from the body, away from the personality, away from all these things outside me, because they are all sources of bondage. I and mine, that is what is Maya, pertaining to this world. When it is with I am the Atman, or I am the child of the divine, or I'm the servant of the Lord, that type of ego is not harmful. And that is called the ripe ego. Sri Ramakrishna says, Paka Ami, Kacha Ami, the unripe ego, where one becomes identified with the world, that is the source of bondage. So, Bhagavad Gita is really an analysis, deep analysis of ourselves beyond the physical body, beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, beyond the ego. There is this wonderful spiritual consciousness. I'm experiencing it now. You are experiencing it now. Because of this, I'm able to say certain things. Because of that presence, you're able to understand those things. What is that entity? That is the mystery. We should not leave this world without making a serious effort to realize our true self. And when we set that high goal, that I just don't want to be happy in this world, and I have all these pleasures at the sense level, that I should, have minimum of suffering and become old and die without knowing myself. If we set some low goal like that, then we will not do justice to this wonderful capacity that is in a human being. A human being, human birth, human life is very special because a human being can re-engineer, redirect that energy, that mind from the outside world, turn it around inward and discover and realize that wonderful spiritual being that we all are. And that will be done one lifetime, 5 lifetimes, 10, 100. There's no rest until that's done. The choice is you want to walk around this world come again and again, or say, let's get it done this time itself. Those who want to sooner will have to put more effort into it. And so we come to the final verse. I think this is the final verse. I think so. Yeah. So the final verse says, they who know thus. So after explaining everything through the eye of wisdom, through the spiritual eye, what do they know? The distinction between the Kshetra and Kshetrajna. Kshetra Kshetrajnayor antaram. Jnana chakshusha. Chakshu means eyes. What type of eyes? Eye of knowledge. Bhut prakritir moksham cha ye vidur yanti te param. So what happens? This whole matrix of this world. I think the word matrix of the movie came from this translation of Swami Gambhiranandji of our Ramakrishna mission, when they tried to describe the entity in the matrix, where they tried to talk about the relative nature of it, of the whole existence. So what happens? That becomes annihilated. The matrix collapses. And when that is, all the waves subside for that particular person, or he dives deep into the ocean, then he reaches the supreme being, supreme goal. That is the purpose of our human life. So I think we have done 3 rounds of the Bhagavad chapter 13. First, we just took word to word meaning. Then we looked at each of the verses independently, separately. And now in the third round, we have tried to get the essence of it in terms what how we are constituted and what's the cause of ignorance and what is realization, what is the goal of realization, and what is the nature of that particular experience. We've gone through in great detail. I hope this study has been useful to us. Any questions, anyone? Comments? Everyone's mic is off.
No, Swamiji, it was very nice, very enlightening.
Very good. You're already enlightened, I can see, Jyoti.
Not really. Have to try very hard.
And keep on trying. Those who are older have to try more, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, time is running out. The name is nice, Jyoti. So try to
Thank you.
realize who you really are. So we have come to this, and I will just conclude this with our Shanti mantra. Don't go off. We'll just discuss what we are going to do next. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.